Last month I just read a ton of self-pub. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and as always guys, I am Andrew, and today I'm here with my Indie Spotlight Part 2, kind of wrapping up a lot of what I read for the Indie Accords in July. And guys, I read so much self-pub that I can't possibly get dedicated video reviews to every single series. It's just not feasible. Luckily, I've got this new Indie Spotlight where I can talk about these in maybe a little bit more of an abbreviated style, but you're still getting to hear about them. Now, the ones that I own physically. Now, I had read We Are Legion, We Are Bob a while ago, but then I read For We Are Many, and then All These Worlds and Heaven's River for the Indie Accords Readathon. And so I kind of wanted to talk about Bobiverse here, because it's a very popular series here on BookTube. Now, what you see here is you see 4 books. I don't consider this to be 4 books. I consider it to be 2 books. This is all kind of just one single story broken up into 3 parts. And then this is its own thing that takes place after the events of these 3 entries. It's very, very good stuff. What we deal with a lot here is basically this is just kind of the repackaged ideas and themes that we're introduced to in the first 3 books. So it's nothing wholly original in Heaven's River, but it's still worth a read. Now, of course, these are narrated by Ray Porter, and I did these on the audio because Ray Porter is an amazing narrator, and honestly, he did Project Hail Mary, he's done Bobiverse, he's one of my new favorite sci-fi narrators, and definitely well worth the listen. But basically, if you don't know what We Are Legion, We Are Bob is already, Bob was this man who had sold his company back on Earth in the 21st century. He was, he'd signed up for cryogenic preservation. He was out celebrating the sale of his company with his employees who were all major shareholders, where he is then struck by a car, and then his consciousness wakes up 200 years later. He is stuck into a probe and shot out into space and basically told to go and explore. And then, of course, we deal with him, replicating, dealing with, identity drift. It's the kind of idea of, if you copy something enough times, there will be some drift. Changes will start to appear within your data. A 1 or a 0 might be copied in the wrong place and stuff like that. And, the data just tends to degrade. And so we see Bob deal with that here because he is now essentially an AI or just kind of a sentient computer. He is the copy of somebody's brain. And so he is to explore the universe more and more and more. He keeps copying himself. He's dealing with discovering alien life, and he's still dealing with the drama from Earth and all that sort of stuff. It is some great, great sci-fi. It's very accessible, and there's a lot of pop culture stuff in here, because basically, it would be weird if Bob just kept referring to his clones as Bob. And so they all take on different names. One takes on the name of Will Riker from Star Trek, one takes on Homer, Bender from Futurama. They take on all of these names. At one point, they form a coalition called Starfleet. It's a whole thing where, each individual Bob takes their own identity and kind of tries to make themselves different from the original copy. It's very, very interesting and well worth a read. I would rate this entire series at about 4 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not sure when I'll get around to revisiting it, and I don't even know if it's completed yet. Because we have a kind of an ending with Heaven's River, but it's not I think there's still some stories that could be told within this universe. Next up, we have got Dungeon Crawler Karl by Matt Denneman. Now, these are sound booth audio productions, and I believe the author is Matt Denneman, and the narrator, I think his name is Jeff Hayes. And this is Lit RPG Game Lit, and it is sweary, it is irreverent, and it is awesome. If you like the Borderlands video games, you're gonna like these. Basically, Karl was minding his own business. He was searching for an apartment after breaking up with his ex-girlfriend when her cat jumps out the window at 2 a.m. and he goes to retrieve the cat, and all of a sudden, the apocalypse hits. Basically, all the buildings just smash into the ground. most of humanity is instantly wiped out like that, and then all of a sudden the aliens start broadcasting, hey, you're going to fight for our entertainment in this subterranean dungeon, and if you reach a certain point, you can determine the fate of your planet. And he's just like, okay. And so basically each book is its own little level of the dungeon as he crawls down. There's goblins, there's all sorts of just irreverent humor. The cat's name is Donut. There was a lot to love here. I actually read the first 3 books in this series for the Indie Accords, and it was just a lot of fun. So if that sounds like something that you would love, because it's funny whenever a new achievement, because I mentioned game mode, it's very much like he's got a heads-up display. It's very much a game that, the tagline is the apocalypse will be televised, and so whenever the AI speaks, it sounds like Claptrap from Borderlands. So it's very well done and very well produced. The next series that I read in its entirety is Traveler's Gate by Will White. And I didn't know what I was going in expecting this. I did this on audio because the audiobooks were re-narrated. Initially, I think Will himself had narrated them, but then he came back and hired Travis Baldree to re-record the audiobooks. And basically this is, I think, set in the same universe as Cradle. And if you understand how the Cradle, iterations work, then that kind of makes a little bit more sense. But essentially, in this world, we have travelers. And travelers they can kind of go into a separate domain, and they can call forth powers from this other dimension. And the powers are varied. There's different dimensions. I think there's 9 or 10 different dimensions that a traveler can pull power from. Essentially, we start out with Simon, this young boy who is traveling with his mother and father as they travel through a merchant, who are then tragically killed by some travelers, only to be rescued by another traveler who basically says, hey, if you ever get tired of this and you want to learn how to be powerful on your own, you come seek me out. And then, he's rescued and he goes about his life. And his mom actually survives. His father's killed. I should clarify. His mother survives, but she is mentally broken. She has been driven insane by these travelers. His mother has been mentally just shattered by these travelers, so she survives, but she is never the same again. And so essentially, we jump forward about, I think, 6 or 7 years. And it comes time for the kingdom's sacrifice. And now, essentially, each dimension has a kind of epitome or a pillar, an incarnation that kind of defines what they are. So, if they stand for power, then, that incarnation will seek power. And a lot of these have been trapped underneath these bloody trees. And in order to maintain the trees, they require a human blood sacrifice of 9 people per, I believe 9 people per tree per year, or is it 1 person per tree per year? I don't actually quite remember that detail. But basically, they come to Simon's village, a bunch of people are kidnapped, and he goes to seek the power, where he then joins Valenhall, the most OP, awesome guild of travelers, I will say. And basically, their whole mantra is, if it doesn't kill you, it made you stronger. And so we just kind of follow Simon, Leah, who is this mysterious figure, and Alan, another traveler from his city, as they go through the entire trilogy. I also gave this one 4 stars. Now, last off, let's talk about the final books that I read and that I want to showcase here on this video. And that is going to be the Swordsman's Intent and the Swordsman's Lament by G.M. White. The Swordsman's Intent is a novella that is a prequel to the Swordsman's Lament, but essentially it follows Blesko, who is the king's champion. He is this duelist who is kind of the sword of the king. And when we meet him in Swordsman's Lament, we're just going to talk about Lament, because if I keep saying Lament and Intent, I'm going to get confused. But basically, it just kind of goes back. The Intent goes back and does the origin story and explains a little bit of what is happening in Lament. So in Lament, basically Blesko, he's aging. He's been the king's champion for a while. He is this lauded hero of this past where, back during the war, by himself, he held this kind of one-man abreast pass for over a day while his compatriots were summoned during this war, and he killed a lot of people, and he earned the title of the king's champion. And essentially what this book is, because I can't really talk a whole lot about it, because what it is it's entirely a mystery. And I will say, when I first started reading this, I was just like, oh, I think I know who the bad guy is. But of course there is a twist. And it's a very creative twist, and I like this twist. But basically, what ends up happening is, through a roundabout set of circumstances, the king's son, the prince, is poisoned to death, and the blame falls on Belasco. Despite the fact that, like, he keeps protesting his innocence. He's like, hey, I'm very close with the king. The prince was my friend. I would never poison somebody. I'm a duelist. If I'm going to kill somebody, it's going to be in the dueling ring. They'll know that I've killed them. And despite this fact, he is still imprisoned. He has to escape and go about proving his innocence. This one was a fantastic read. It's listed as historical fantasy. However, I believe that this falls more in line with historical fiction, just set in a fictional setting. I don't really remember any sort of fantastical elements. There's a couple quotes here where that could be construed as there might be magic in this world, but really we're dealing with just duelists and espionage and just betrayal. It's very good, and it's a lot of fun to read. Those are the books that I wanted to showcase here for you guys today in the second indie showcase that I've got for you this month. This is part 2. There will not be a part 3 because, of course, we've got next month to look forward to. That said, guys, let me know in the comments down below what is some indie, sci-fi, or fantasy that you would like to see get a little bit more attention. I'm always on the lookout for a recommendation. I love the Self-Pub community. That said, guys, make sure you're liking and subscribing, hitting that bell notification so you can get regular updates when I put out new content, hitting that Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And as always, guys, till next time, peace out, stay magical, bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons.